I still remember the day Eliza told me she was pregnant. It was a Tuesday in April, the kind of spring day that feels like summer playing peekaboo. We were having dinner at the small Italian restaurant where we'd had our first date 2 years earlier. I'd ordered the same dish, fettuccine with clams, partly out of superstition, partly because it was damn good. She'd been quiet during the meal, pushing her food around her plate. I'd asked twice if everything was okay, and both times she'd said yes with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I was starting to worry that she was about to break up with me when she set down her fork, looked me straight in the eyes, and said, "Daniel, I'm pregnant." The restaurant noise faded to a distant hum. I stared at her, my mind simultaneously blank and racing. We'd always been careful. She was on the pill. But nothing's foolproof, we both knew that. "Are you sure?" I asked, my voice coming out strange and hollow. She nodded, tears forming in her eyes. "I took 3 tests. All positive." I reached across the table and took her hand. It was cold despite the warmth of the restaurant. "How do you feel about it?" "Scared," she admitted. "But also kind of excited?" "Is that crazy?" I squeezed her hand. "Not crazy at all." In that moment, looking at Eliza's face, those green eyes I'd fallen for, the constellation of freckles across her nose, the slight tremble in her lower lip, something shifted inside me. A warmth spread through my chest, a certainty I hadn't known I was capable of feeling. "I love you," I said. "We'll figure this out together." 2 weeks later, I proposed. Not because I felt trapped or obligated, but because I genuinely wanted to build a life with her. The baby news had simply accelerated a plan that was already forming in the back of my mind. I took her to the botanical gardens where we'd spent our 3rd date, down to the koi pond she loved. I'd arranged for a photographer to hide nearby to capture the moment. When I got down on one knee, Eliza's hands flew to her mouth, and she nodded before I even finished asking the question. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes," she said as I slid the ring onto her finger, a vintage sapphire surrounded by tiny diamonds that had belonged to my grandmother. The first sign that something was off came during week 10 of the pregnancy. We were having breakfast, discussing potential names, just for fun. We were still months away from knowing the sex when I mentioned the upcoming doctor's appointment. "It's Thursday at 10, right?" "I put it in my calendar so I could come with you," I said, pouring more coffee into my mug. A flicker of something crossed Eliza's face. Confusion? Alarm? It was gone so quickly I thought I'd imagined it. "Oh, it got rescheduled," she said, buttering her toast with excessive concentration. "It's next Monday now. But it's just a routine checkup, you don't need to come." I insisted. "I want to be involved in every step. Plus, don't we get to hear the heartbeat soon?" "That's usually at 12 weeks, she said, seeming to relax. "You can definitely come to that one." I thought nothing of it at the time. Appointments get rescheduled all the time, especially with busy OB-GYNs. But then it happened again. And again. I was never quite able to make it to a doctor's appointment with her. Something always came up, the doctor was running behind, the appointment was changed last minute, or Eliza would tell me she'd already gone when I thought it was scheduled for later in the week. "I'm sorry," she'd say, looking genuinely apologetic. "Everything's fine though. The doctor says I'm right on track." I believed her. Why wouldn't I? This was Eliza, the woman I loved, the mother of my future child. The woman who cried during dog food commercials and spent her free time volunteering at a literacy program for underprivileged kids. The woman who'd held me through the night when my dad had his heart attack last year, who knew exactly how I took my coffee, who could make me laugh even on my worst days. Then came the inconsistencies in her story. One day she'd mentioned that the baby was the size of a lime, but according to the pregnancy books I'd been reading, that didn't match up with how far along she claimed to be. When I asked about morning sickness, sometimes she'd say it was terrible, other times she'd say she'd been lucky to avoid it entirely. "Every pregnancy is different," she'd say with a shrug when I mentioned the inconsistency. My sister had completely different symptoms with each of her kids. That was true, and I felt guilty for even questioning her. But the doubts had taken root and I couldn't shake them. Especially when her physical appearance didn't seem to match what I'd read about pregnancy progression. At 16 weeks, there was only the slightest change in her figure, nothing like the baby bump I'd expected based on everything I'd learned. Some women don't show much until later, she explained when I gently brought it up, especially with first pregnancies. Plus, I've been doing those prenatal yoga exercises to keep my core strong. Again, plausible. But combined with everything else, the unease continued to grow. The breaking point came when I found a receipt in her purse. I wasn't snooping, she'd asked me to grab her credit card while she was in the shower. The receipt was from a pharmacy dated just 2 days earlier when she'd told me she was at her doctor's appointment. It listed prenatal vitamins, which made sense, but also tampons. Tampons? I stared at the receipt, feeling like I'd been punched in the stomach. There could be explanations, I told myself. Maybe she bought them for someone else. Maybe it was habit and she didn't actually need them now. But deep down I knew. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay beside Eliza, watching the rise and fall of her chest, wondering how the woman I thought I knew could do this. Was anything real? Had I completely misjudged her character? Or was there something else going on? Was she experiencing some kind of psychological break? The next day, while Eliza was at work, I visited the medical center where she claimed her OBGYN practiced. I felt like a character in a spy movie, my heart racing as I approached the reception desk. "Hi, I'm trying to confirm an appointment for my fiancée, Eliza Reeves," I said, the lie tasting bitter on my tongue. "She thinks it might have been rescheduled." The receptionist tapped at her keyboard. "I'm sorry, I don't see any patient by that name in our system. Could you check again? She's been coming here for her prenatal care. She's about 17 weeks along now." More clicking. "I'm sorry, sir. We have no record of an Eliza Reeves as a patient here. Are you sure this is the correct office?" I thanked her and left, my mind reeling. I sat in my car in the parking lot for nearly an hour, trying to process what this meant. I scrolled through text messages where Eliza had mentioned appointments, found the name of the doctor she'd referred to, Dr. Patel. I went back inside and asked if a Dr. Patel worked there. "Yes, Dr. Patel is one of our OBGYNs, the receptionist confirmed. So Eliza had done her research. She'd used the name of a real doctor at the practice, but she'd never been a patient there. I drove home in a fog, nearly missing my exit twice. When I got there, I poured myself a whiskey, my first since Eliza had announced her pregnancy. I'd stopped drinking in solidarity with her. Another lie. For 3 days, I walked around in a daze, going through the motions at work, coming home to kiss Eliza hello, placing my hand on their belly, asking about her day, about the baby. Each word felt like ash in my mouth. I needed to be sure. Maybe there was an explanation I was missing. Maybe she'd switched doctors and forgotten to tell me. Maybe I'd misunderstood which medical center she went to. So I hired a private investigator. Cost more than I could really afford, but I had to know the truth. His name was Theo, a retired cop with kind eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. He didn't judge when I explained my suspicions, just nodded and took notes. "People lie for all sorts of reasons," he said. "Let's find out what's really going on here." Over the next 2 weeks, Theo followed Eliza, checked medical records, and did whatever it is PIs do to uncover the truth. I lived in a state of suspended animation, going through the motions of daily life while waiting for the axe to fall. When Theo called to say he had results, I met him at a coffee shop 3 towns over, paranoid about being seen. "I'm sorry," he said, sliding a folder across the table. "You were right." The evidence was damning. Photos of Eliza entering a different medical building, not an OBGYN's office, but a regular doctor. Copies of medical records Theo had somehow obtained. I didn't ask how, and he didn't explain, showing that Eliza had been prescribed antidepressants recently, but no mention of pregnancy. A statement from a bartender at a place near her work who remembered serving her wine several times over the past month. And the final nail in the coffin, a recorded conversation Theo had engineered by posing as a pharmaceutical research company doing a study on pregnancy. He'd called Eliza directly and she'd explicitly stated she wasn't pregnant and had never been pregnant. I sat there, holding the evidence of my fiancé's elaborate deception, feeling like I was watching my life unravel from a distance. Part of me wanted to confront her immediately, to demand answers, to scream and rage at the betrayal. But another part of me, a colder, harder part one hadn't known existed, wanted something else. If she could play this game, so could I. She'd taken something precious from me, not just the baby that never existed, but my trust, my love, my vision of our future together. I wanted her to feel a fraction of what I was feeling. So I decided to play along, to let her believe her plan was working, and to plan a revelation that would be impossible for her to manipulate her way out of. Our wedding was set for June 25th, about 2 months away. By then, Eliza would be 5 months pregnant, far enough along that her lack of a significant baby bump would be undeniable to anyone who knew anything about pregnancy. The timing was perfect. Those 2 months were the hardest of my life. Every morning I woke up next to her, watching her pretend to struggle with morning sickness. Every night I lay beside her, listening to her breathing, wondering how I could have been so blind. Every conversation felt like a performance, every touch a betrayal. I played the excited father-to-be, buying parenting books, discussing nursery colors, even starting a college fund. I suggested we register for baby gifts for after the wedding. I brought home little onesies and tiny socks that made Eliza tear up. Were those tears real, or just part of her act? I couldn't tell anymore. Meanwhile, I was making my own preparations. I gathered all the evidence Theo had provided. I spoke with both our families, sworn to secrecy, showing them proof of Eliza's deception. It was humiliating but necessary. I needed them to understand what was about to happen at the wedding. Most were shocked and supportive, though her parents refused to believe it, accusing me of fabricating evidence because I had cold feet. I arranged for our wedding venue to have a large screen and projector set up for the reception, telling Eliza it was for a special photo montage I was putting together as a surprise for her. That part was true, just not in the way she imagined. The wedding day arrived sunny and perfect because of course it was. The universe has a dark sense of humor that way. I stood at the altar in a church filled with flowers and expectant faces, watching Eliza walk down the aisle in her empire waist wedding gown designed to accommodate her baby bump. She looked beautiful, radiant even. For a moment, doubt crept in. Had I made a terrible mistake? Was I about to humiliate an innocent woman? Then I remembered the evidence. The lies. The manipulation. The way she'd used my desire for a family as a weapon against me. My resolve hardened. I said my vows mechanically, feeling nothing as the words passed my lips. Promises of honesty and fidelity that meant nothing in the face of her deception. When the minister pronounced us husband and wife, I kissed her briefly, avoiding her eyes. The reception was held in the garden behind the church, white tents set up over tables decorated with spring flowers. Our first dance. The cake cutting. Toasts from friends who had no idea what was coming. Through it all, I smiled and played my part even as I felt myself breaking inside. Finally, it was time. The DJ announced that I had prepared a special presentation for my new wife. The lights dimmed slightly and all eyes turned to the screen at the front of the tent. I stood up, glass in hand, and faced our guests. I want to thank everyone for coming today to celebrate with Eliza and me, I began. When I met Eliza 2 years ago, I thought I'd found my soulmate. Someone I could trust completely. Someone who would never lie to me. Eliza smiled up at me, but there was uncertainty in her eyes now. She could tell something was off. And then, a few months ago, Eliza gave me the greatest news of my life. She told me we were going to have a baby. A few guests clapped and cheered. I was overjoyed. I proposed. I started planning for our future as a family. I clicked the remote in my hand and the screen behind me came to life. But then I discovered something. The first image appeared, the receipt for tampons. Then the confirmation from the medical center that she'd never been a patient there. Then photos of her drinking wine when she was supposedly avoiding alcohol for the baby's health. And finally, the transcript of her conversation with Theo explicitly denying any pregnancy. A collective gasp went through the room. I heard Eliza's mother cry out. Eliza herself had gone completely white, her mouth open but no sound coming out. My fiancée, excuse me, my wife of approximately 2 hours has never been pregnant, I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. She invented a baby to trap me into marriage. She lied to me, to all of you, for months. She watched me prepare for a child that never existed. I turned to look directly at Eliza now. I've played along with your lie, waiting for this moment. Consider this my wedding gift to you, the truth laid bare for everyone to see. The silence in the tent was absolute. Then Eliza stood up, tears streaming down her face. Daniel, please, she said, reaching for me. I can explain. I was going to tell you. When? I asked, stepping back from her touch. After the wedding? After a convenient miscarriage in a few weeks? Or were you planning to fake an entire pregnancy for 9 months? I love you, she sobbed. I was afraid of losing you. You never had me, I said quietly. Not the real me. Because you never showed me the real you. I removed my wedding ring and placed it on the table between us. I've already spoken with a lawyer. Given the circumstances, an annulment should be fairly straightforward. Don't try to contact me. With that, I turned and walked out of the tent, past the shocked faces of our guests, past Eliza's parents who were rushing to her side, past my own family who knew what was coming but looked devastated nonetheless. I got into my car, already packed with the essentials I'd need for the next few days, and drove away from the ruins of what should have been the happiest day of my life. That was 6 months ago. The annulment went through without much trouble. Eliza didn't contest it, perhaps realizing there was no salvaging the situation. I learned later that she'd been seeing a therapist for anxiety and depression, triggered in part by watching all her friends settle down and start families while her own relationships kept failing. Apparently, she'd convinced herself that I was getting ready to leave her, and the fake pregnancy was her desperate attempt to hold onto me. Understanding her motives hasn't made the betrayal any easier to bear. Some days I still wake up reaching for her, forgetting for a blissful moment what happened. Some days I'm still angry enough to punch walls. And some days I feel an odd sort of grief for the baby that never existed, the future I had started to imagine, all those hopes and dreams dissolved like smoke. I'm in therapy now too. Learning to trust again others, but mostly myself. Learning to recognize that my blind spots weren't character flaws but human limitations. Learning that someone can show you one face for years and hide another completely. My friends worry that I'm becoming cynical, that I'll never let anyone close again. Maybe they're right. The betrayal changed me, hardened parts of me that used to be soft and trusting. But I like to think it also clarified things. I know now what I will and won't accept in a relationship. I know the value of truth even when it's painful. And in my darkest moments, when the anger and hurt threaten to consume me, I remind myself that I didn't let her get away with it. I didn't swallow the lie to avoid confrontation. I stood up for myself, for the truth, in the most dramatic way possible. Was it revenge? Absolutely. Was it cruel? Perhaps. Would I do it the same way again? I don't know. But as I sit here on my new apartment's balcony, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of promise, I feel something like peace settling over me. Not happiness, not yet, but a quiet certainty that I honored my own truth in the face of deception. That has to count for something. The future I thought I had may be gone, but in its place is possibility. Undefined, uncertain, but mine. Authentically, honestly mine. And for now, that's enough.